I want to thank all of my team for the vision of putting this together to get everybody out in the community. And it turns out we had a bunch of people, not just from Charlottesville, but we got people as far-flung as Baltimore and North Carolina and Northern Kentucky, Naples, Florida. It's unbelievable. So I had no idea that it was going to turn into a pilgrimage for so many people. So very grateful for all of the travel and the opportunity to be face-to-face with you guys. It certainly energizes me. It's always exciting to hear like-minded people who are passionate for health and passionate for the possibility of the future of humanity, all of these things. I live on the verge all the time, so sometimes it's hard to tell. All right. Well, we're very excited to have you here, obviously. The Mclinic is what we're here to kind of showcase. The Mclinic is a rebranding of Revolution Health Center, which was the place that I started on my lonesome in 2010 with my nurse and my incredible administrator, Stacy, who's in the back. Thank you, Stacy. Stacy's my longest running colleague and employee. She and I were at UVA almost 12 years ago together and still running strong. So appreciate the old team there and the new team with Megan and Jess and the whole team at Clinic now with all of our incredible practitioners. It's been really a blessing to see this team flourish and go far beyond my own areas of expertise and intuition to bring a bunch of brilliant women in here. And so now I have to see patients a couple days a month still to have some masculine energy in that clinic because it's booming with goddesses. We have all these incredible goddess energies in here with Antje Waxman, who's our Egoscue therapist, and Jude Krishnan, who's our incredible nurse practitioner, and of course Jani, who's our professor from China in Chinese medicine. She's one of the best acupuncturists that's ever been in the area, as well as incredibly gifted with the Chinese herbal regimens. And so a real gift to have these women really at the forefront of this. William Vitalis is in and out of the clinic with me. He and I kind of bump around the country and then try to get into clinic as often as we can. William and I have been working together over the last 7 years or so together, really trying to push the envelope of understanding the relationship between physics and biology and kind of coming to terms with the fact that the human body is not really a cellular structure, it's an atomic structure first. And the atoms are very mysterious in that they're 99.999% vacuum space. And so everything we do in medical world of allopathic medicine focuses on the 0.001% of the body that's solid. It's the atomic structure of the electrons and their relationship to the proton that gives the perception of solidity to the concrete we stand on or to the bodies we live in, when in reality everything is vacuum space, which is fascinating and really interesting when we see biology start to go awry. For cells to start to dysfunction, it turns out that you have to have disruption of the fabric of the individual before the cells start to develop symptoms of dysfunction. In the same way, if we reverse that away from the disease mentality and say, when you see health burst forth, there has to be health at this vacuum space level before it hits the cell. And so this is where William's been helping push the envelope with me over the last 7 years. We have a series of cameras that we use in clinic that image the human energy field and really bring incredible alignment of kind of cutting edge technology and scalar wave therapies and all this alongside Jani and all of her expertise of 4,000 years of Chinese medicine into the same space. And the exhilarating part of that every day for Jude and I when we see patients is that, man, it's incredible to image them on a camera, get a really detailed picture of where their body is carrying stress and dysfunction, and then send them to Jani, and she does a Chinese pulse reading, and unbeknownst to her, she comes back with the exact same read that we just got on the camera that's, cutting edge technology. So it's very cool to see this collision of astrophysics, atomic physics, and leading mathematical diagnostic tools to be colliding with 4,000 years of Chinese medicine to all be agreeing that there's such a thing as health. And that's an encouraging thing for all of us because we see around us a real collapse of that health in the United States. The main reason we're here today, why are we having a health fair at all or bringing attention to this, is to create an epicenter. There's a very huge awareness among us that there's no way that this little clinic is going to change public health in 300 million Americans. There's no way it's going to affect the health of 7 billion people on Earth. this tiny little space instead intends to be an epicenter of ultimately education. And education is ultimately the revolution at hand. I think the internet was a big piece of this. We have the internet starting to bring information out. The vast majority of you who have come from Florida and Kentucky and all this for today's little thing, all of you found us online. You guys found us through, a podcast or a webinar or, whatever methods that you consume that first bit of knowledge, and then it became a slippery slope, right? The little testimonials that you guys have shared, you watched a half-hour video of Zach, and now you've watched 732 hours of YouTube, and you're wondering if we should start sending you a check for the amount of time you're putting into this effort. I've had 3 of you offer to give my talk for me this morning, which I appreciate. You guys know my material so well. Karen, one of you. So really appreciate your dedication to the information that we share. I want you to know that the interesting things and the compelling information and truths that you guys have learned from me are not from me. I obviously learned this on my own. You have to learn anything before you can teach anything. And I learned much of it from my patients over time. And I want that to be an encouraging message as well to everybody, is that it's not about having a brilliant doctor. It's not about having a brilliant Chinese medicine therapist. It's actually about being a community. That's the exciting part of what we've seen unfold since our little tiny clinic down in Scottsville, Virginia in 2010, is that a community is built around this mission to figure out what is health. And so my patients have been a huge piece of that, as well as this group of colleagues that continues to grow now across the world. We have extraordinary colleagues now in information technology and computer artificial intelligence in Amsterdam. We have colleagues throughout Brazil that are working on these projects. We're really trying to bring the best of the internet to hand, not just to solve problems, but actually to be a community builder. And so one of the products, if you haven't heard of yet, that is debuting right now, it's in beta testing in the public, and we're doing a lot of revisions and continued building of the program, but it's called Atlas Blue. And Atlas Blue will be hitting the public to you guys. You guys are all tied into a lot of my email sources and everything else, and so you guys will be among the first to hear about it as it goes public. Yeah, probably first quarter of 2019 will be when it really gets a big push into the public environment. Atlas Blue is spelled a little different. It's ATLUS, because I believe it's an us that's going to make the Atlas Blue again. And so we need to rebuild this universe that we have on this planet in a cooperative fashion. And I think that's been done at different times in history. I think that what we can see in history is a story of cooperation and then collapse. Cooperative building of things and then collapse. And we can even see it in just a generation. I would say in the 1980s there was an explosion of wealth in the United States through a lot of empowerment of the middle class. That exploded the wealth of this nation. Our economy grew faster than we'd seen it grow in many, many decades, if not ever. And then, of course, by the end of the 1990s, we were seeing this explosive growth of the tech world and everything else, and then we saw a collapse. Every time we see a collapse, the phenomenon seems to be that the wealth that the masses built gets shrunk back to a few individuals. And so a few individuals get to consolidate all the wealth that the masses built. And I think this story through history could be mapped all the way back to the very beginning of civilization. I think I'm getting wind sound on my mic there. So at the beginning of civilization, and we start to see structures, whether we go back to the Palestine and the early Middle East structures, Babylonia, then King Solomon, and all these histories, we can point to a people group building great wealth and then it collapsing back to a king. A people group building great wealth and then it collapsing back to an emperor, in Rome or whatever it is. And Rome collapses and you see distribution of wealth happen again, and then it consolidates again in the hands of a few. Certainly we can point to the British Empire and then its collapse, and the money fell right back into a single family. I don't know if you know the story of the Rothschilds, but the Rothschilds became the family that consolidated all the wealth of the British Empire that was spread across the whole world, many, many families, and all collapsed back to a single private held wealth within the Rothschild family. And so it's just a perfect example. It's not because the Rothschilds are bad, it's just they were at the epicenter of another collapse and a reconsolidation. And so our interest in the future is to bring health not just to your physical body, but to an environment and where there is constant distribution of wealth and creativity, and not the predictable collapse on the back end. It's a big dream that we have. It pushes the envelope of anything we've ever really thought about. revolutionizing American healthcare is not hard. Us and many others are building lifeboats right now, and the Titanic is sinking. And so to revolutionize this system, you just have to wait 10 years, okay? Because the current system is destroying itself. I already knew this when I was at the University of Virginia. We were already having massive think tanks at the university of the collapse of the insurance system. We called it the death spiral of insurance. So this was in 2003, 2004. We had the heads of Cigna, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, all the big healthcare companies were there at UVA, and we're having these huge round tables. We had sociologists, we had economists, we had all of these different minds working on this reality that as the population gets sicker, I can't even find my own microphone here, as the population gets sicker, the cost of care goes up. And for every 1% increase in cost of care, 1% of the population would drop out of healthcare because they weren't sick and it was too much money to be insured, and so they would drop out, which of course would then enrich or consolidate the number of sick people that were being insured, which would increase the rate at which the cost of insurance was going up. And so we had reached this death spiral where we were seeing 6 to 8% increase in cost of healthcare every year, which meant 6 to 8% of the population was dropping out every year. And so the stopgap that would become the American Health Care Act, or Obamacare as it became known, was a stopgap to this problem. We got to get everybody back into the insurance pool because the healthy people all left, and now we're just insuring sick people, and we can't keep this thing going. So Obamacare was a stopgap for that. But obviously, making everybody go back on insurance just buys you a little time because of the trajectory of chronic disease that we have in this country. It doesn't actually solve the problem, right? The interesting thing about disease is it's never been caused by a lack of medicine. Right? And so that simple reality points to why the Mclinic is here. Is if at the fundamentals of healthcare delivery we believe that medicine is the solution to disease, we're always going to be chasing our tail down a very, very long hole. And so the Mclinic is here to bring a science team. Biomic Science is our basic laboratory team and everything else that is doing the best science on earth, really. John Gilday, our PhD, who's our lead scientist, is bringing the kind of cancer research technology that I was doing with him at the University of Virginia, and we're reapplying that to understand how proteins fold in the human gut to create a barrier system and the tight junction stuff you guys know so well. That reality of being able to take a science team and start to apply it to what is the mechanisms and fundamentals of health is the kind of relationship or reversal that Mclinic is all about. And so when you walk through this little clinic, if you haven't stepped in there, the first thing that you're going to see is our nutritionist in there, and she's got a whole spread of wonderful food sitting in there that she's prepping this morning. And it's inspiring to see good food, isn't it? It's like when you see the colors that are there, you see the colors that are popping out of a garden, and she's making fresh salsa in there and guacamole, two of my favorite food groups. And so you start seeing the real stuff made, and then immediately you intrinsically know that this is the beginning of health, is what you put in your body. And so these are brush strokes. This is an unorganized talk in a lot of ways, I realize, but I know that you guys know my material I do on YouTube, so I got to mix it up here today for you. You drove all this way, and so I got to give you the big picture today since you're here. And this is what I'm excited about is the big picture. So Atlas Blue is going to be a part of the big picture because it's going to give an environment. Atlas Blue is a project-oriented social media type environment, a social network environment built around projects rather than people and their cats. So Facebook, has become famous for being that kind of same gravitational force for watching cat videos and all of this that you would have for the videos that we put out on gut health. The slippery slope of social media has been interesting in that the main thing that's happened with it is again consolidated the energy of billions of people into the hands of a few, right? And so with Facebook and Google, you have the actions and activities and interests of billions of users being monetized by a few people into advertising dollars. And so Mark Zuckerberg And then on the other side of that, the consumer side of Amazon, you've got Mark Zuckerberg with kind of the social side, and then you've got the Amazon side with Bezos. Jeff Bezos is the wealthiest guy on the planet now. I don't know if you just saw that headline come through in the last couple of weeks, $150 billion net worth. It's because he's monetizing your interests, behaviors, and everything else with advertising dollars. And so Atlas Blue is moving into the space to say we need to deconstruct that model that is just repeating the Rothschild phenomenon, the collapse of the Roman Empire, everything else, and we need to create an environment, a social environment, where you own your own life. You own your own data. And so Atlas Blue is tracking the behavior and search behavior and the consumer behavior of our community and giving it back to you, so that you can decide to monetize that if you want. If you want to sell your data to advertisers as a block of the population, you'll get money for that, not the owners of Atlas Blue. If you want to stay private, you don't need to sell that at all, and you can keep that safe, and you can keep your space your own space. And so owning your own space, we believe, is maybe the fundamental civil liberty that has been missing from all of the collapses through human history. Own your own space starts with the things you're thinking about. Because ultimately, I'm one guy who's had a few clever ideas that was then surrounded by really brilliant people that made those clever ideas start to become a reality. I know that every single person on the planet has clever ideas. And if we were to surround you with the same opportunities that I've had, clever people, and protected space, your ideas would all have their maximum impact. And that's the revolution that we want to see come forth with Atlas Blue, is our best idea yet has been to protect your best ideas. And I think when we start to do that as a community, we're going to see a revolution happen in every sector that we can imagine, from the energy sector to the education sector, to the health sector, to the sociology sector, ultimately to the political sector. We're going to see a revolution when individuals can own their own space and be protected to develop their own ideas and then be supported by the global community in that. And so how does Atlas Blue work? You sign up just like you would for any other email network or anything else. You put your little profile in, but instead of asking you 1,000 questions about where you went to school and all of this, like you do on LinkedIn or something like that, that's trying to connect people by their backgrounds, instead we're going to have you put in a lot of data about your passion. What is your passion project? What is your best idea, and what are the details in that? And then that becomes what we start matching you with. The artificial intelligence search engine that sits behind this has the same kind of technology that Google runs on and everything else. This AI system starts matching you to individuals around the planet that have a similar idea or have a skill that may be pertinent to your idea. And so we want you to be empowered in your ideas and your passions to put together a team around you. Once you have a team, we can then start to match you to investors that have interest in your area. Because it turns out that the vast majority of private investors on the planet have a niche interest. And it's hard for them to find people who are doing their niche interest. And so they end up kind of broadening out their investment portfolios away from perhaps their passion point. And so they get dilution. When we remove the dilution effect and put passion with passion, I think we're going to see a real revolution happen through Atlas Blue. And so this is kind of a diversion of what you thought you were going to hear, but I wanted to be in the back of your mind as you go forward in these next couple months, as you start to get ready for the arrival of Atlas Blue, to say, what is my passion project? You wouldn't be here if I was just passionate. You're here because you're passionate. And you drove from Florida and Kentucky and everywhere else because you're passionate about something. And maybe you share something in common with me and that's why you're here. But ultimately the passion that you have is what we're most interested in. The thing that really compels me when we dial back now to the Mclinic is that I've never seen a patient heal from a chronic disease or a severe life-threatening event if they didn't have passion in the background. Hopelessness is the most dangerous predictor of death out there. Hopelessness, when it hits, ages us so very quickly. And hopelessness seems to be built around a couple of emotions, fear and guilt. And that fear and guilt paradigm is what I enter into every single visit I have now. The very first visit with any patient that I've never met, I start to try to figure out where do they have fear coming from and where do they have guilt coming from. And it doesn't take very long because a lot of my patients have cancer. And so it's not a surprise that the fear piece is part of that cancer thing. But it's surprising then when you drill past the cancer and say, okay, let's stop thinking about cancer, because that's just a symptom of something deeper. What did you fear before you knew cancer? What did you feel guilty about before you had cancer? And that becomes a much more compelling visit, a much more compelling discussion. And what I find again is loneliness is at the base of a lot of that, a sense of abandonment, a sense of loneliness, and everything else. So that's why Atlas Blue comes up for me today to introduce you to, because in the end, I think if we end loneliness and start to give everybody the sense of the opportunity for connectedness, it will engender the opposite of disease. It will engender health at a very, very deep level. And so that's going to be the interesting kind of manifestation that we create as a health community. We are going to create a technology community that's built around education and support to one another. The very, very exciting thing that we have on the back end of Atlas Blue that's not going to be in its first iteration. It'll take us about 2 years, we think, to build the community that will allow us to launch the second half of Atlas Blue. But on the backside of Atlas Blue, all of the thought leaders that come percolating up through the global community in Atlas Blue will have the opportunity to join the faculty. And we will create online universities on a global level that have never been seen before at this scale. We will have faculty throughout the world that have expertise and thought leadership in different areas, and we can build from that a cohesive curriculum that becomes free education for the developing world. The United States is going to have to change. You've seen this already changing. Our universities are going from, bricks and mortar columns and ivy to online universities and all of this as the technology comes into play. Well, we're going to accelerate that as we open up free education to the world, and the United States is going to have to rethink the way we do education. Education should not be big business as it has become. Education should be the foundation of business, right? And so that's the reversal that we think Atlas Blue can again be part of this revolution of education. And ultimately, if we don't educate, we don't survive. Because right now you guys know the statistics. If you've heard any of my talks, you know the statistics. I'm wondering if I'm going to pull this off my collar, if I can do a better job of shielding that wind from you. Oh, or is it this mic maybe? Can you turn that one off? Is that off?
It's off. You want to try?
I'm just wondering where the wind's coming from. Can you guys hear me on that one?
Yes.
Yeah, let's try turning it on.
That was your mic.
So what we see with education is an exciting reality that if we're going to reverse this pattern, where right now we have 1 in 30 children with autism, we have 1 in 8 with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder disrupting the classroom environment. We've got 1 in 4 of those children with severe allergies to food or environment. We've got 1 in 3, 1 in 2 with anxiety and depression disorders by the time they're in their 30s. And so we have this incredibly sick population that's now being put on medications that remove creativity. And that's one of my main concerns about our approach to treating our children is the first thing that we tend to put these kids on is speed. So Adderall and Ritalin, which are now the number 1 and number 2 drugs prescribed in children under the age of 20, those drugs are the equivalent of speed. And so they are adrenaline-inducing drugs. And adrenaline works to focus you, and that's why we use these drugs, because the kids are kind of scattered and they're not paying attention, it seems like, and so we give them a drug and they can finally focus on a multiple choice test and give us the right answer to a multiple choice question. The concern, of course, is that when you have an adrenaline surge, you have to shut down some major parts of your brain for protection and survival. If a lion jumps out of the jungle at you, the last thing you want to do at that moment is sit down and compose a poem or a concerto, because right now you just need to get your ass in gear and run as fast as you can and forget about any creative thought you were having a moment before. Now imagine an entire generation being raised in an adrenaline environment where they are not only in the structure of the school that's stripped creativity out. We've ended our arts programs, we've ended so many of our creative opportunities for kids, and we've boiled it down to standardized testing. And then we put on top of that Adderall and Ritalin. You end up realizing that we are really pushing large generations that haven't had much space for creativity. And in the end, that's going to come back to this reality is we need to revolutionize the education environment.
If attention deficit and autism is a reality for a toxic planet that we live on, then we need to create an educational environment in which those kids can have creative space. And again, Atlas Blue thinks that this could be the opportunity to create an online environment of education where kids could have a much more creative flow in their day. Maybe the best thing for that child is to run around like crazy between the hours of 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. in the park systems and have parkour and everything else, and that never sit in a classroom. And then by around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, when their biology is starting to slow down, when their natural cortisol and other hormones are settling in, then give them 2 hours of intensive education online or something like that. You can start to see that we could actually tailor the day to the child rather than trying to force the kids into a predisposed schedule that was created in the 1920s and 30s with the current education system. So these are broad brushstrokes to tell you, if you're here today, you're not here just to have gut health. You're not here for me to sell you Restore. You're not here for me to tell you to eat vegetables. You're here because you're passionate, and I think you can become a bigger epicenter. And I think Atlas Blue can empower that. And I think as a community, we're going to find out that you have brilliant ideas that just need more support. You need more team members, you need your science proved out for your ideas, or you need a delivery system created around you, and that's where my excitement gets really rolling, is we need to build something bigger than healthcare system. A healthcare system that does disease management is a Band-Aid. Humanity needs something much deeper than a Band-Aid. Humanity needs a new root system to grow out of. Our social structure, our political structure, all of the chaos that you see on CNN, and the fact that our president now spends most of the time tweeting on Twitter is just, even if he was tweeting really intelligent, interesting things, the fact that our politics is being pulled out or doled out through Twitter is a very concerning reality. If you look at the incredible discourse that happened at the beginning of our nation, the founding fathers, and you read the Federalist Papers. Me and a colleague are working in the next few months to rewrite all the Federalist Papers for today's environment. The Federalist Papers were a brilliant download that happened, and the intellectual prowess that went into those initially is such a foundation for us to work from. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There was so much discourse and incredibly intelligent political thought that went into the beginning of this nation. And now that political thought has been dumbed down to 1 or 2 sentences on Twitter, is not the cause, it's a symptom, right? Our president is the symptom of an inflamed political system. You guys hear inflammation out of my mouth all the time when we're talking about gut health and everything else. But if you watch the discourse between Clinton and Trump over the course of the last campaign, you could literally watch their rhetoric get more and more inflamed as they became more and more inflamed biologically. You remember Hillary collapsed with pneumonia in the last month of the campaign, ended up in the hospital briefly. You remember how red Trump's face got over the course of those last couple months. He looked like he was going to have a heart attack at any second, because both of them were on the road constantly, not taking care of self, eating crap food, not sleeping. They were doing everything wrong on the biologic level, and they were getting more and more physically inflamed. And just like a kid on Adderall, come on up here, buddy. Try right here. Stand up here. Check out what his shirt says. His shirt says sidekick. I've got a sidekick over here. So that's, let's see, where was I before sidekick kicked in here? Inflammation. And so you see this collapse of the biology, and just like a child on Adderall who's being forced into a fight or flight adrenaline state, creativity disappears. So the creative thought of our politicians was disappearing over the course of that campaign as they got sicker. And so whether it's our adults or our children, as we all pull into a fight or flight state, we lose our creativity of thought and our creativity of communication. And communication ultimately should be a very thoughtful process. We're here in Charlottesville, Virginia, the home of Thomas Jefferson, and one of my favorite Jefferson quotes out there is, "I'm sorry for the long letter. I didn't have time to write you a short one." There's deep truth in that, right? Brilliance is concise, which shows you how much I have to learn. You guys all spend all this time saying how smart Zach is. Well, if I was really smart, I would have been done 20 minutes ago. As we become more brilliant, we become more concise. As we become more in tune with truth, there's less to say and more to do. And that, I think, is going to be the promise of Atlas Blue if we do this as a community. The exciting thing about Atlas Blue is it doesn't do anything on its own, right? It's just a computer program. It doesn't do anything. It becomes real when people engage with people through that space. And so I have great faith in civilization. I have great faith in the contraction and expansion of humanity because it's been going on since our beginning. Right now, we're in a collapse phase. Wealth is being consolidated in the hands of a few. We are going to have an expansion again. Wealth will return to the hands of many who are productive. Because the interesting thing about a collapse into a few hands is those few hands weren't the ones that created the wealth in the first place. And so if they're not producers, where's the wealth going to come from next? And so it has to go back into the hands of the producers, which is the masses. And so as we see this expansion, I hope that Atlas Blue and I hope it inspires many competitors. I hope there's also all of a sudden an explosion of IT platforms that are supporting people to own their own space, own their own data, monetize their own ideas, monetize their own interests and behaviors online for their own good. Because I really believe that if we start to dissolve the financial barriers between the developing world and the developed world, we'll A, create more wealth than has ever been seen on the planet, and B, we can sustain the time in which that is distributed through all the hands of those 7.6 billion people on Earth. And so that's the kind of revolution we see afoot. That's the big picture. I want to zoom back down because a lot of you guys thought we were going to talk about tight junctions and gut health today. And so I want to go there. And I want to talk a little bit about Restore because of what our call to you guys. We have an opportunity with you guys here to make a call to you. Restore, as you know, is a bunch of carbon molecules made by bacteria and fungi. We pull this out of fossil soils in the Southwest. We were just in New Mexico Monday and Tuesday last week. Again, new sources of material, trying to figure out better and better ways to deliver this to you. Very cool product. It always inspires me. It's always fascinating that Mother Earth planted an antidote to some of our chemical problems 50, 60 million years ago. That's an incredible story of grace. It's an incredible story of the provision of Mother Nature and God that would look to providing a foundational source of solutions to us that runs all the way into our fossil record. So that's all compelling and interesting, but I can tell you, whenever I'm out there in the deserts, in these fossil soils, it's always a huge reminder that we need to put ourselves out of business as quickly as possible. And so my call to you is, if you are a Restore fanatic, get the word out about what Restore is, but then help us put ourselves out of business by eliminating the need for Restore. And the reason I really feel that is that I know that we probably could sustain the population for another 100, 150 years. If you extrapolate our current production capacity to a global population, there's enough fossil ore for about 100 years as a rough estimate. Which means we need to fix everything much sooner than that, right? So what is the problem that's driving the need for Restore? The problem is chemical farming, ultimately. And so watch for, and you can already go online to find the website, it's farmersfootprint.com. Farmers Footprint is a large project that we're channeling. All the money that's come out of Restore is going into our other companies. I don't know if you know that yet, but the Biomic is our kind of tip of the spear for our financial income for our parent company, which is Seraphic Group. And Seraphic has 8 subsidiaries running to find solutions for everything we see massive problems to. One of those big ones is Atlas Blue. And so a lot of the money is being poured into Atlas Blue to create this international programming team that's been working for 2 years hard on this. And as that comes out, we'll see a big fruition from Restore in that. But Farmers Footprint is we think maybe the solution or our best hope of putting ourselves out of business in Restore by teaching farmers how to grow real food again. So we've been filming a documentary series along the Mississippi River. We're back out there next week. We're going to be filming in Michigan again with a bunch of farmers that have been farming genetically modified corn and soybean for the last 18 years and have gone into bankruptcy doing that. And so the incredible reality is we have this mindset that Monsanto and other chemical farming and companies have given us, is that you can't survive as a farmer without chemicals. But in reality, this is the very nature that has bankrupted the vast majority of the farmers on the planet, is this chemical farming modality. So it's a fallacy that this stuff makes farmers rich. It causes small farms to collapse faster, not slower. And so now if you drive through to the heartland, you see farms that are 10 or 100,000 acres, where it used to be made up of 300, 400 acre farms across the entire Midwest, the breadbasket. Those have all collapsed, and we now have these mega farms that have to be chemical farmed because of the structure that they put around them. And so we want to be a part of that solution and the response to that with Farmer's Footprint. The term Farmer's Footprint is from a Japanese proverb that says the best fertilizer for a garden is the farmer's footprint. And we love that concept of it's humans being in touch with Mother Earth is that's where life springs from, is our involvement in that root cause of health, that root cause of not just health for humans but for the planet. And so we have joined up with Alan and a number of other farmers that are teaching farmers how to recover their GMO farmed lands. And we're documenting this series, and it's beautiful. Our first family that we're really supporting is Grant and Dawn. They are an incredible team, husband and wife team. They are running their sixth generation farm in Minnesota, and their farm has been failing for the last 10 years hardcore. And one of Grant's biggest stressors is that he is failing 6 generations of his family. You know, this farm was passed on successfully generation after generation, and then he's the one that's going to fail. Well, in the very first year he took that farm over, he said he was going to take it to a level that it had never been succeeded for, so he planted GMO crops for the first time. GMO corn. He was right on the forefront. In 1996 was when he started farming. It was the first year GMO corn was available. So he became part of that first wave of GMO farming. By 2002, he was going bankrupt. He was losing it. And every year, Monsanto would come back and say, here's a new Roundup-resistant seed version that's going to be more successful than the last. I know your crop wasn't very good last year, but we've created a better one this year. And so every year there was a promise of it's going to get better, it's going to get better. His soybean yield over the time went from going from generational growth of traditional soybeans to 16 years later, he was growing 40 bushels down to 22 bushels an acre. And so it cut his productivity almost in half by growing GMO crops over that period of time. And that's what's been bankrupting his family. His children had left the farm. His wife is ex-Air Force and spends all of her time working on the farm. And the two of them get up at 4 a.m. and they work until all hours of the night trying to keep their farm going. Through working 100 hours a week each, they end up yielding about $45,000 at the end of the year. They can't get their kids through school. It's like the saddest story, most ridiculous, hopeless story you've ever heard. They started working with Alan and this team to help them move back away from this about a year ago, away from the GMO cropping. They're still using Roundup on the farm when we first started filming in February, and they're making a move now to eliminate glyphosate completely from their farming by next spring. We are seeing new life on this farm in an incredible way so fast. We're only a few months really into this journey with them. And in this journey, they went totally organic with the food that was being fed to their cows, and suddenly the death, they were having a huge problem with their cattle health. They were losing an inordinate amount of cattle. They went to organic feed only for their cattle and saw an almost immediate, within 6 weeks, recovery of the health of their cows. And so their profit margin increased in 6 weeks. And so we saw this explosion happening. My team is telling me that Qigong is starting now. My team knows that I am not eloquent and I talk all day long. All right. So this is why we get. This is my wife, Jen. Newly married, so we just got married. And so Farmer's Footprint, we're seeing this recovery, and the really exciting thing that we see in the background of this is that their daughter decided to come back to the farm, and she has created a farm-to-table business selling organically grown meat and stuff to restaurants in Minneapolis. So she bought a pickup truck, and she's driving this stuff to restaurants directly. She's making a higher profit than either of her parents have ever made on the crops they've had in just 6 months of effort. And so in just this short amount of time, it proves that if you bring community around a failing space, you create space for people to have brilliant ideas, they will have brilliant ideas and they will make those successful. We didn't have to come tell them how to run a business. They figured that out. They just needed to know they weren't alone and that it wasn't hopeless and that they were going to have consumers eager to meet them where they went with their organic farming. And so Farmers Footprint, we hope, is going to be a revolution. One thing that will come out of this is the opportunity to sponsor an acre of farmland to recovery. And so for $100 a year, you can sponsor 1 acre. $100 a year, every family in America can sponsor 1 acre, and we're going to create a safety net much bigger than the food bill that is encouraging farmers to plant GMO sugar beets and everything else. We're going to subsidize them to grow real food through a sponsorship nonprofit program, and that will only take 3 years to sponsor a farm, and then they'll be off and running, and they'll be more profitable than they ever were in the GMO environment. And so we don't want to be against the status quo. We want to be a future. And so we want to create a future that is so easy to get to that there's no reason why the current paradigm won't collapse in a few years. There's no reason that we can't reverse the whole thing just through community. And so that's our dream. We appreciate you being here with us today and making such an effort to get here through such long distance and everything else. Thank you, Bill and Jamie and their family, for being here. That's my brother and his family from Chicago. I want to give a call out to the blood drive here. We've got the blood drive off to the right, I think here is where over on this side. Look for the blood drive. I'll look for it with you. So we got a blood drive going, and we've got Qigong starting with my best friend here, William Vitalis. So come on up, William, and tell us where to do Qigong with you. Anything else? Nordic walking hour right now too?
Yeah.
Where's the Nordic walking happening?
Qigong here and
Okay. Nordic walking over by the green rings, and Qigong right here?
right there, in the middle.
In the middle? Yeah. All right, in the middle of the sun? All right.
Yeah, I can be here, I can...
Where